Hi there, Elevated Planet community. This is John Drew here from Elevated Planet, and today I'm with Sheila Seppi. Sheila, whose book I have read very recently. Hi there, Sheila.
Hi, how are you?
Fantastic, thank you. I'm delighted you could put aside the time today because I got to say your book was exceptionally inspirational. But we have this thing called the Twiglet Zone, which is where I introduce to our mainstream folks out there some pretty fantastical kind of ideas. And the premise on which your book is based, which is called Walk-ins, the Cosmology of the Soul, I think to hear it from you, it adds an awful lot of validity to it. Because I've been talking about this kind of thing for a long time. I was a big fan of Dolores Cannon and all her work. And so I was familiar with the concept already, but I had never met anybody that actually has gone through that specific experience.
Well, and before we start, let me say if this had not happened to me, I would not believe it possible
Right.
because I grew up in a very fundamentalist Christian family in the South, and we had very, very set, very firm belief systems. And something like a walk in did not exist within that conversation or that realm. And a walk in is when one soul leaves the body and another soul enters. So some people think it's similar to a near death experience, and I guess in a way that it is. But in my case, I had been a very, very, very sick person. And I had, over the course of years, been diagnosed with bone cancer, brain tumors, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. I had erythema nodosum and sarcoidosis, and I walked with a cane. And, you know, I couldn't play with my children. My youngest was 3, and so I would lay on the couch every day and he would play. I was starting to develop RA, and if it hadn't been for Celebrex, I would not have been able to open and close my hands. So needless to say, my health was in the toilet. And so I went to bed this way. And the very next morning, it felt like someone reached down, grabbed me by the hair of my head, pulled me bolt right up in bed, and it was like lightning was running through my body. And then I was in white space. And I don't know how long I was in white space, but I was very comfortable. I was out of pain. I really don't think I was thinking about it at the time, but it was one of those places you just don't want to leave.
Mm.
I didn't see any scenery. I didn't see any people. It was just pure white space, but it was, you know, it was one of those experiences that you really just can't explain with words. It was full of unconditional love and compassion. And, it was just the ideal place to be. But then all of a sudden, my peripheral vision started coming back in, and then my frontal vision. And as I sat there, I'm looking around the room. It's like, what the heck am I doing sitting up in bed? But
Mm.
as I looked around the room, everything was the same and everything was different, except now my body was completely healed, which I discovered at my next doctor's visit, and to which they had absolutely no explanation, just like, oh my gosh, this is a miracle, yay. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, woohoo. And so I felt better. I had energy, I had clarity. If you hear that little noise in the background, this is my little Havanese Willow, who's with me all the time. He thinks he has to be at every interview. Sorry about that.
That's all
But
right. We don't mind.
anyway, I had clairvoyance and clairaudience and clairsentient, and I remembered what we would call past lives. I remembered how the universe was structured, and I remembered healing modalities that I'd never studied. And for somebody that had never read a metaphysical book in their life, this came as quite a shock to me, because all of a sudden I'm hearing voices and I'm seeing people and I'm having all of this visceral response when I'm around people and knowing things about them that quite honestly I didn't want to know. And all of this information was flooding through me, and I didn't have any explanation. I thought I was going crazy. I thought I had had a psychotic mental break, and that I learned very quickly that I couldn't talk about what happened to me. Within 3 months, I had left the marriage that I was in because it was already dysfunctional. I was dysfunctional. The marriage was dysfunctional. Everything was dysfunctional. But I had left that marriage within 3 months, and within another 3 months, I had found my first spiritual teacher. Now, I'd never had a spiritual teacher, wasn't looking for a spiritual teacher. I was looking for a counselor to give me a little blue pill because my
Mhm.
background was in psychology. And I thought I could go tell my story and she'd say, honey, yes, you've had a psychotic break, poor thing, and give me a prescription and life would be good. I would get back on with my life. But instead, that's not what happened. And she began to explain to me about walk-ins, and she was also of Hopi lineage. And because my background was in psychology, it felt really good for me to go and see her. And I had an automatic bonding with her. And I kept thinking, oh, it's just, we're both in the psychology field and, that type of thing.
Right.
But it was more than that. Everything she was telling me resonated true for me. And even though I didn't want to believe it and really couldn't believe it at first, I knew that it was true.
Yeah.
And so, over a period of months, I worked with her, and she invited me to attend what's called circles. And this was women's gatherings that got together, and she shared with us the teachings of the Hopi people.
Mm.
And she was of Hopi lineage. Learning those techniques, those modalities, learning about shamanism, learning how to travel in the upper world, the lower world, really is what helped to anchor me into
Mm.
this world.
Yeah.
Because even though I could tell somebody what happened, nobody could relate to me.
Mm.
I didn't have anyone to talk to, and it was there in these realms that I really met my spirit guides and my teachers. And they took me aside and they started explaining to me what I was experiencing, how it had occurred, and those types of things. And I stayed in kind of a state of shock for really a couple of years. I knew who I was, but it's kind of hard to wrap your brain around that.
Yeah.
And so it took me a while. And so when I did finally begin to accept it, everything in my life started to change and shift. And I met a new man and we married and we moved to Colorado. And by this time, I knew there was no way I could ever work in mainstream anything ever again.
Mm.
Because, if you're sitting there typing and all of a sudden your printer starts printing and you haven't hit print and you're like, people start looking at you stranger than they did before. And so it's like, okay, this is not going to work for me. And
Mm.
so I set up my own healing practice in Colorado. And during that time, during those first years, it was very, very slow. But it was a beautiful time and it was divinely orchestrated that way because it gave me more and more time to investigate this walk in phenomenon. And one day I was working with my guides, and to be honest, I was just like, hey, did I like snatch this body? Did I push this soul out? Did I cause harm? And they explained to me absolutely not, that before that soul had incarnated, there was a birth plan in place. And everybody has this, not just a walk-in, every single person, because there are certain, mm, for lack of better term, we have an agenda we want to meet. So we have our
Right.
goals and objectives, and we also put in place for ourselves exit timelines. And this was an exit strategy that soul, it had already learned everything it needed to learn, but
Mm.
it was tired and it was weary and it stayed past its comfort zone.
Mm.
Okay. And
Mm.
so when I don't know how deep you want me to go into this, but
Oh, keep going.
let's just
Keep
say
going.
when I was on the other side,
Yes.
we can go into what that means later. But when I was on the other side, and we heard the soul of this body cry out to be released, it was decided that I would be the aspect that would come in. And so as I came in, that soul was propelled outward through my chest. Typically, it goes out the head, but I came in, it went out the chest, and that is what had propelled me upright in the bed.
Right.
And so I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm thinking, all right, these guys know what they're talking about because that
Yeah.
really happened. And then the next thing that they told me was, so then I started asking, okay, so, if I came in, where did the soul go? And they explained again that on the other side, in a way, it's kind of like it is here. But
Mm,
on the other side, that's when we're really awake.
mm,
This is a planet of, as beautiful as it is, of false matrixing. Everything is actually a holograph in dense form, and there are, all I have to do is look around and I can see. I can see the pixels that make everything up, and I keep. I try not to do that because it can ruin a perfectly beautiful scarf, or it can ruin, it can ruin the painting on the walls. Like, come on, guys, but they showed me how on the other side we basically are projecting an aspect of ourself into human form to have this experience, and that it's not just this one experience. We can be having multiple experiences on this planet, on other planets, in other galaxies, other universes, etc., because the soul is so large. And then I said, okay, so um, now I'm confused. What do you mean we can be in more places at one time? Because
right.
I I had been raised that you live a good life, you die, you go to heaven, and you're there for eternity, whether you're eating chocolate or fishing, whatever it is that your passion's desire is. That's what you do. And then they said, well, it's really not that way. Now, when we pass, whatever we believe, like when I pass, no doubt Jesus or Mary will be there to greet me along with other family members because that's in my belief system.
Mm,
Okay. But if someone believes that there is nothing, they may go into a state of nothingness until they're like, wait a minute,
yeah.
this is not real. So whatever it is that we think, we have these opportunities for growth. And as a soul, that's what we're constantly doing. We're growing, we're experiencing, we're learning, and we choose those people that we want to have these experiences with. And when I understood that, there was an immediate forgiveness of the ex husband because I
Right.
thought somebody had sucked his brain out and put a demon in his body, which they could have, I don't know. But, it made me understand that he was one of my greatest teachers.
Mm,
And then there was that love and that compassion. And then I had to forgive myself for all the, ex-wife kind of thoughts that you can have.
right. Yeah.
Kind of things. And so once I learned, though, that he could have been my best friend on the other side, and the reality of it is we're all connected. We all have like our spirit families that we travel with. We have our good buddies that's in our spirit groups that we all travel with. And it takes us a long, long, long time to set these scenarios up
Mm,
for like a walk-in scenario to happen.
mm,
Now, this particular body had other souls lined up that at certain times they could come in.
right.
And the truth of the matter is, because this soul had missed the deadline and was kind of in between windows when they cried out. And this is not, if you're having a bad day, you can't say, oh, I beg for a walk in to come in.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. This is on your soul resonance, not your mind. This is the soul vibration that went up. And I, at the time, was in a collective of beings in our multidimensional selves, and we were working on the earth's crystalline grid. And so when this vibration went up, we were right here, and it made it easy for me to come in. Now, one of the things being, again, I don't know if the listeners are going to start turning it off saying, okay, that lady's certified,
Yeah.
but here we
Oh,
go.
keep
Here
going.
we go. So the previous soul to this body had been an Arcturian soul. And
Right.
so when that being came into this body, there was an energetic framework that had been in place. And when this soul left, that energetic framework was still in place that made it easy for me to slip into the body, because one of the multidimensional aspects that I had been and therefore had accumulated all of that knowledge and frequency had been an Arcturian. And
Right.
so, as sick as this body was, I was able to very gently enter into the body without frying the neurology or the biology. But over time, it was just a matter of seconds, though. When I came in, it was like bam, and the body was healed.
Mm.
But it didn't burn anything out, which is really, truly amazing. It just kind of blew my mind.
Yeah.
And you have to remember, when a walk in comes into a body, they're getting a used car.
Yeah.
Okay. So I still had all of the thoughts. I still had all of the programming. I still had all of the sorry about that. I still had all of the behaviors and just the thought processes of the old soul,
Yeah.
because it had imprinted on this body. So when I came in, even though there was this miraculous healing, I still had a lot of the dysfunctional thoughts and a lot of this dysfunctional ways. And over time, I began to change those because they no longer served or resonated with the vibration of my soul. And so instead of drinking Diet Mountain Dew, which I thought was the nectar of the gods, I started drinking water. And
Hmm.
instead of eating fast foods, I started cooking at home, and I started having salads and, all of those types of things. And so, everybody around me was really paying attention. It's like, oh, what's up with her? Because my behavior had changed so much, and because of those early days, then I was able to bring it forward. So in talking with my guides about that, during this same conversation, I was asking, okay, so what's up with all the behavioral changes? Why did that have to change? And they said because it was no longer in resonance with the vibration of the soul, and that it was no longer in resonance with the life path that I was going to have. And that when we made that shift, that's kind of like, hi, hello, how are you? Yep, we got an agreement, let's go. And it was really fast and furious. And my path, my mission is that of my collective that I came from, which is my multidimensional self. And that collective is to be a way shower. And we still are here on the planet working in the crystalline grid, infusing it with love and light and compassion and frequencies that help in the planet to wake up and to be able to shift to this new paradigm, this new way of thinking, this new consciousness. And
Mm.
it makes it easier for me now, having gone through all those crazy years, and literally thinking I was crazy, to be able to talk with people as they're having their spiritual awakening, because they're like, I don't know what's happening. I'm hearing things. I don't believe in this. I went to bed and now I'm this way, or this happened. I had an automobile accident. And a lot of times, what I find is people are walk ins. But a lot of times, what's happened is people are having their own spiritual awakening due to the fact that they've done all this personal work, they've done all the heavy stuff. I kind of got a, get out of jail free card with that one, because when I came in, I only had to clear the baggage that was imprinted into
Hmm.
this body, and I hadn't accumulated. So now I just have my own 23 years worth of accumulated stuff,
Hmm.
that I have to work through, which makes it a whole lot easier. But all of us have to go through these processes, whether we're a walk in or not. If we're going to shift the way that we think about things, if we want to move into a higher vibration, we have to let go of all that stuff that no longer serves us. And the reality of it is, one of the things that I saw from the other side is there's no shame or blame here. There
Right.
just is. And on the other side, everything is just an experience. So it doesn't matter if I choose to be a spiritual teacher or if I choose Well, in my case, it actually does. But most of the time with people, it doesn't matter the experience that they choose because they will be fulfilling their mission because they are already here. And sometimes that mission is to experience the bad just as much as it is to experience the good. Because many times we may have never had a lifetime on a planet full of duality, all this false matrixing, and have been able to have a joyful experience. I mean, how
Mm,
powerful is that? When we can come in and anchor into a body, a physical form, and all of this duality, all of these false teachings, all of these matrices of it's deception and everything that's around us, and yet we can come to a place of centeredness within ourselves and have a soulful experience at the same time we're having the human experience. I think that's pretty amazing.
mm, it is. It's incredible. Now, one of the things that I'm always intrigued about, you're here along with many, many others on the planet to help with the evolution that is taking place on the planet, right? The
Correct.
raising of frequencies, the raising of consciousness. How how do you I mean, one of the things that always intrigues me is who knows what this is going to look like, right? How
Right.
much do we know? I mean, I keep hearing pictures of certain things and certain dates and various, but I've no idea is the truth of it. But I know things are changing, and I know things are changing for the better, even though we've got to go through some pretty, you would consider negative kind of aspects in order to get to the positive. How do you interpret this evolution